This is how you shoot powerful cinematic portraits anywhere, even in an abandoned warehouse covered in graffiti. Most photographers walk into a place like this and see chaos, bad light, harsh shadows, and a background that's impossible to control. But with 2 lights and a clear plan, you can turn a location like this into a fully sculpted portrait set, and I'm gonna show you exactly how. My name is Austin Hunter. I'm a portrait photographer and public affairs specialist, and I've made a career out of shooting professionally. I help photographers learn off-camera flash and tell better stories through photography. So if that's something you're interested in, this video is for you. Let's get into it. Recently, I was visiting Dallas and decided to put on a portrait photo shoot with my friend Leorosa. In planning for the shoot, I found the Fabrication Yard, an abandoned warehouse space that artists have turned into a massive outdoor graffiti gallery. Even though I had never shot here before, I immediately felt it would be the right place for the shoot. I was inspired to create a hip-hop themed session using this location. Now, maybe it's just me, but whenever I shoot portraits, I always try to choose locations that offer not just compositions, but also context, if at all possible. If the environment I'm capturing my subject in can provide context as to who they are, I think it makes the final image all the more compelling. With the location set, I began to consider outfits that would match the context of the Fabrication Yard. The 2 outfits I chose for this shoot were a baggy hip-hop look and a kind of gothic, kind of punky aesthetic. All right, now let's talk about lighting this place, because the Fabrication Yard comes with its own set of lighting challenges. I knew one light wasn't going to cut it if I wanted depth, separation, and control. So I brought 2 lights, the Godox AD400 and a second light to expose for the background. That would be my Godox AD200. That combination gives me full exposure control over both the subject and the environment. For my first modifier, I used a 36-inch Glow Easy Lock softbox. It's quick to open, reliable, and when I'm working on a location like this, I like having gear that sets up and breaks down fast. My wife, Sarah, operated the key light on a LightReach Plus monopod, which gave us a lot of flexibility for moving quickly through the scene. If you don't have an assistant, you can also run this setup on a light stand. But whenever possible, I like having a lighting assistant because it gives me one less thing to think about so I can focus on composing my shots and directing my scene. By the way, guys, all the gear I'm using is linked in the description below, so check it out if you want to. Now, when you're using flash, it's always good to expose for the ambient light first. But in this room, there wasn't much ambient light to work with. So I lit the background up with the AD200 first to create some depth and detail. Once the background looked right, I brought in my key light exposure on Leo using the AD400. Here's an example of what it would look like without a background light. Notice how without the background light, Leo just kind of fades into the darkness of the background. Having that second light helps to separate our subject from the background, thus making her appear more dimensional in the image. Here's a few more shots from this first scene. Next, we moved into the adjacent room. Leo wanted to work in some hip-hop dance moves. Motion can make a portrait look more dynamic, but it's also going to force me to shift my lighting approach. When I'm shooting motion shots, I generally want to lower my flash power. At a low power, the strobe both fires faster and recycles faster, which means I can shoot in quick bursts and reliably catch the exact moment that I want to expose. Now, if you're new to flash photography and all of this sounds too complicated, don't worry. Learning how to expose flash manually is just like learning manual mode on your camera. It's confusing at first, but automatic with practice. To compensate for the reduced flash output, I raised my ISO to bring the exposure back up without sacrificing much speed or sharpness. I started this set with just 1 light at first, but added the background light again because I felt that the scene was too dark. Here is how the images looked: sharp, dynamic, and full of energy. Exactly what we wanted for a hip-hop action frame. For our next setup, we moved into another room with these steel poles running through it. And it was here that I decided to bring out the color lighting gels. I attached a blue gel to the background light. Blue versus red would provide some nice color contrast, and it's an easy way to add visual impact without overcomplicating the setup. Whenever your lighting starts to feel a bit boring, color gels are one of the easiest ways to shake things up. Color can add visual interest to a scene and make an otherwise bland shot look more interesting. This room was the perfect place to do that, and Leo's red outfit gave me something strong to play off. I aimed that gelled AD200 up at the ceiling and let it rip. Bouncing the light like that keeps it soft and spread out instead of creating a hard, bright hot spot on the wall, which I didn't want. By now, it's starting to get late, and I knew we'd have to wrap this outfit up if we wanted to have time for the second one. For the second look, Leo switched up her makeup because we were going all in on that punky goth girl aesthetic. At this point, I swapped modifiers and switched to a 28-inch deep parabolic softbox. I like using a parabolic softbox for portraits because it gives you more contouring and directionality. The result is that the light feels even more focused and cinematic on the subject. We started with some portraits against this wall here, and then we moved over to this metal gate that had caught my eye. It's also covered in graffiti and offers some really nice leading lines. One of my favorite shots from this shoot came from this spot right here. By now, we were fully into blue hour, and blue hour can be challenging with off-camera flash because ambient light begins to drop off very fast. Every few minutes, you're adjusting multiple settings at once, raising your ISO, lowering your flash power, and balancing your exposure in between to keep everything looking balanced. It kind of feels like I'm overclocking my brain. We added in the AD200 background light again, this time bouncing it off the wall behind Leo. It allows us to shoot well after the sun is gone and still get a relatively clean, well-exposed result. You can use it to either expose the background like we did here, or use it as a hair light on the subject to separate them from the darkness. And then we took some of our final shots for the day, Leo standing out in the middle of this parking lot. I wasn't certain this was gonna work when I saw it, but it ended up turning out to be a pretty strong shot. Sometimes it's the shots you weren't sure about that end up surprising you. At this point, the light was gone, we were all quite tired and ready to call it. And that's the entire shoot. 2 lights, a graffiti yard, and the intention to shape the scene instead of letting the scene shape us. Everything you saw here proves the point I opened with, that you can create powerful, cinematic portraits anywhere if you understand light and how to control it. If this breakdown helped you understand how to approach real-world lighting with more intention, make sure to subscribe. I've got location shoots, more lighting setups, and more behind-the-scenes breakdowns coming your way. Alright guys, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.